Trade negotiations resuming today in China as President Trump sounds off on the possibility of making a deal.
We're either going to make a great deal or we're not going to make a deal at all. They've had a terrible year because of the tariffs. A lot of companies are moving out of China. China is dying to make a deal with me. But whether or not I'll do it, it's up to me. It's not up to them.
Here now is former Trump campaign trade advisor Curtis Ellis. Curtis, great to see you.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So just yesterday, the president said that he thought that China was actually going to wait it out till 2020 because they don't want to negotiate with him and they want to see potentially what happens in the election. But today he's saying they're dying to make a deal with me. It's up to me, not to them. So which is it?
Well, look, the president says he doesn't care if China doesn't make a deal, and he shouldn't care because the tariffs are having the desired effect. Major companies, at least 50 of them, are moving out or have plans to move out of China. Their economy is sinking fast, 27-year low of their growth rate. Exports from China are down 12%, and China's bearing the brunt of the tariffs, either through currency devaluation or they're cutting prices so they don't lose out to the competition. Remember, 5 of China's top 10 exports to the U.S. are also available from Mexico. So we don't need China. China needs us. Meanwhile, our economy is strong, record low unemployment, wages are rising, and we're hitting on all cylinders while they're stumbling. So we don't need a deal with China, and China would like to see. Now there's a report out, I don't know if you saw it today, that China is trying to interfere in our elections. They started this with the tariffs on farmers, putting advertising inserts into the Des Moines Register. They're doing everything they can to try to influence the outcome of next year's election because they know people like Sleepy Joe Biden, who's been bought and paid for by the Chinese, would probably roll over, remove the tariffs, and try to go back to business as usual before.
Do you have any proof of that? You just said bought and paid for by China. I'm interrupting right now, and I apologize for that, but I think that's a pretty big statement to just make without any proof.
Hunter Biden went over to China with his father when his father was the vice president on Air Force Two, and magically, when he returned, he gets $1.5 billion from the government-owned Bank of China to invest in a hedge fund, which Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, had absolutely no experience in investments. That company, that hedge fund, is now invested in companies like Hikvision, which supplies surveillance cameras to Chinese concentration camps. So, yes, Joe Biden then comes out and says, China's not our enemy. These are good folks. We got nothing to worry about. So maybe the check was not written directly to Joe Biden, but the influence, this is how Chinese influence operations work. This is how they turned Bill Clinton, who was tough on China during the campaign, but then became a panda hugger after he was elected. They used his Wall Street advisors to turn him around. So he suddenly said, let's build a bridge to the 21st century, and that will go right through China, and we'll open up trade with China, and then suddenly they'll become democratic, and we don't need to worry about Tiananmen Square. The butchers of Beijing will become cupcake makers.
Okay, I think you've made your point. However, I think it is valid to say that President Xi is bicycling Trump, and with some success. I mean, the tariffs have hurt China, and companies are leaving. And some of that was going to happen anyway, and it's now accelerating because of their rising labor costs. But to say it's not hurting us is silly. The reality is Trump hasn't gone far enough with his trade war. I'm much more of a hawk than you are, and you know that. And he's created a situation where basically President Xi can wait him out. It may be hurting him, but not enough that he can't wait him out and push him into the election. And this is going to be a liability in the election. The economy is slowing. We're not at 3% growth anymore. A big reason for that is companies are not investing. The investment numbers were terrible in last Friday's report. And a good deal of that businesses contribute to that, to uncertainty over the trade situation.
Well,
they may be exaggerating. No, they may be. We listen to you. They may be exaggerating its consequences.
We can give business certainty by making these 25% tariffs permanent.
I agree,
and
he hasn't done
that.
that.
That will give business certainty. And there's a study out that shows if these tariffs were permanent, it would increase American jobs, 1 million American jobs.
I don't know that I necessarily believe that study, although I'm in favor of the tariffs. But the point is that, hold on, is that he needs to go further and harder. This notion of gradualism doesn't work.
I'm not going to say no to you, Peter. I'm not going to say no.
All right. This gradualism socialism doesn't work, and as a consequence, he's this notion that he can make friends with this guy. This notion that somehow or other he can buddy up to him and come to some sort of agreement, have him to dinner and convert him. I mean, this is like trying to create Satan into Christianity. It's absurd.
I'm not sure he really believes that. Look, this is a negotiating tactic. You always talk about my colleague on the other side, my good friend, and then you whack him in the back room.
I'm losing confidence in him in that regard.
Here's the thing I think everybody's missing, though, guys, and I get it that the tariffs are a great souvenir of a terrible year for China. But I think, Curtis, one thing we forget that we take kind of so complacently is that China needs us more than we need them. And if you look at China's trade balance, for example, they've got expanding trade relationships with Korea, Russia, other Southeast Asian countries that make them a bigger player in that area than they've ever been. So if we do lose that relationship, they may not be hurt as much as we think.
Right. We've turned our back on Asia, and that's important. By pulling out of the TPP, Trump made a terrible strategic mistake because he lost a lot of leverage with China.
Look, Bob Lighthizer is exactly right. TPP was a bad deal.
No, I think Bob is dead wrong on that one. It would have opened up 12 more back
doors for China to sneak its stuff into the United States, and it would have increased China's influence in the region. We are starting to see more investment in Southeast Asia as these companies move out of China. They're moving into Southeast Asia, and a lot of these are Korean and Japanese companies. And it's better that the Japanese invest in Southeast Asia than China does.
Curtis, I want to quickly ask you, Jonathan Hoenig. I mean, the president has talked about, we lose money with trade with China. He says we're making all this money with tariffs. Would we be better off, in your estimate, if there was just no trade with China? Would that behoove Americans and American companies if we just
I think our integration with China, I think our economic integration with China was a huge mistake. We are now in the role of investing in building a Frankenstein monster. I think
Hold on a second. I'll answer. We would be better off with the kind of posture towards China that we had towards Russia, towards the Soviet Union during the Cold War. We have no business integrating our supply chains with human rights abusers and people who are seeking global hegemony the way the Chinese are. It's absurd. This is like trading with Hitler.
Peter, we're going to have to leave it there.
That's exactly right.
Another college